Hey there, it's Karenology. If you think you've heard it all, wait until you hear this wild story. The wind that day was something else. It whipped across the plain like it had a score to settle, kicking up dust and old leaves, rattling the dry branches above my porch. I was repairing a section of my fence when the silver SUV pulled up to the locked gate like it owned the place. It came to a stop too close to the no trespassing sign I'd bolted in 2 languages. The door opened with the smug little sigh only new cars have, and out stepped Nancy Bradley. I recognized her instantly. Grayish blonde hair sprayed into a helmet. Beige cardigan, despite the heat, clipboard in one hand, sunglasses perched on her forehead like a crown. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She just started walking toward the gate like I'd invited her. You're trespassing, I said, my voice carrying easy through the wind. I'm here on behalf of the Homeowner Association, she said, ignoring me, already reaching into her folder. We've decided to open a public walking trail that will run through the west side of your property. It's a community initiative. There is no community on my land, I said, still holding the fencing pliers. You can leave now. She blinked, tilted her head, and smiled like I was a pet refusing a bath. This is bigger than just you, Mr. Carver. It's about access, about fairness. Everyone else is cooperating. I leaned on the fence post and stared at her. This land's been in my family since before your HOA even had a table to sit at. You step on it again without permission, and it won't be a polite conversation. She didn't flinch, but her lip twitched. You'll regret this, she said flatly, tucking the papers back into her folder. The board will be informed. I do that, I said. And while you're at it, inform them I don't negotiate with trespassers. She turned without another word, heels crunching the gravel. I watched her drive off, cloud of dust trailing behind, and felt something twist in my gut. I knew that wasn't the end of it. That night, my feed delivery didn't come. No call, no reschedule, just silence. I tried the number I always used, but it rang to a dead tone. Then my postal box was torn from its post 2 days later, bent like a kicked beer can. I replaced it. The next morning, I found it smashed again, a note shoved inside. This isn't your land anymore. Neighbors stopped waving. People who used to nod at the feed store looked through me like I was a shadow. One even crossed the street when he saw me coming. I didn't blame them. Not entirely. Fear spreads easy when it's fed the right lies. Then came the real punch. A visit from Officer Hale. Young and polite, but with that government starch in his stance. Mr. Carver, he said, we've had a few complaints from the Homeowner Association. They're saying you've been threatening workers trying to improve community space. Do you see any workers here? I said, stepping aside so he could look behind me. You see a park? A trail? This is private land. Always has been. I understand, sir, he said, hands at his belt. But I'm going to need to file a report. It's procedure. Your procedure's starting to feel like harassment. He shifted, uncomfortable. Just doing my job. Then do it right, I said. And write down that I've got cameras. None of what they're saying happened. He scribbled something and left. I stood in the gravel, watching the dust settle again. Only now it didn't blow away. It clung. I didn't sleep that night. Not from fear, but from the hum. That low vibration in your gut that says something's coming. And it ain't bringing peace. The next morning, the back half of my fence had been taken down. Not storm damage. Clean cuts, like a crew, had come through in the dark and taken what they wanted. I followed the prints, boot tracks, at least 3 different sizes, and they led back to the neighboring lot that backed up to mine. A rental. HOA owned. That's when I knew Nancy hadn't come alone that day. She was just the first wave. Funny thing is, I almost respected the move. Almost. But now, it was my turn to move. I started that morning the way I always do, with black coffee and silence. But there was a sourness to the air, like the land itself was bracing for a fight. I checked the cameras first. 3 were down, wires snipped clean. 1 still worked, barely, and caught shadows in the shapes with tools moving low and fast across the back field. They didn't bother hiding. It wasn't theft. Nothing was taken. It was about presence, territory, like wolves pissing on trees. I walked the damaged fence line with a fresh coil of barbed wire slung over my shoulder and a hammer hooked to my belt. The grass was trampled in a line that didn't belong. It curved where no animal path ever ran, straight to the HOA's rental lot. When I reached the breach, I found something worse than broken wood. There, posted on a fresh stake, was a laminated sign that read, "Future site of Community Access Trail, approved by HOA," with their damn logo on it. That was the first time I felt something truly crack open inside me. Not anger, not yet, just a realization. They weren't asking. They weren't negotiating. They were taking. I pulled the sign out of the ground and snapped it in half with one twist. Buried the pieces under the gravel with my boot. Then I went to town, the feed store, first. I needed nails, replacement wire, maybe a new trail camera. The girl at the counter gave me a look like I had lice crawling out of my ears. Her name was Ashley. Used to chat my ear off about horses and her granddad's old Chevy. Today, she barely said 2 words. I asked about the camera. She shrugged. "Think we're out." "You sure?" I said, scanning the shelves. "Store policy changed. We don't sell that model anymore." "Right." Outside, a couple of old-timers stood by the soda machine, whispering like kids caught smoking. One gave me a nod, then turned away. The other just stared at his boots. You don't know loneliness until your own town turns its back. I drove home slower than usual, feeling every bump in the road like it was trying to tell me something. The ranch was quiet when I pulled up. Too quiet. Then I saw the drone, small, gray, hovering low over the far pasture like a metal mosquito. It darted left, then right, then zipped off into the trees. No markings, no sound beyond that faint whine. I followed it on foot, but lost it before I hit the ridge. But I knew where it came from. That night, I sat on the porch with my rifle across my lap. Just in case. I wasn't going to shoot anyone, but I wanted them to see me. Let the wind carry the message. Next day, I filed a report. Not that I trusted it would do anything, but it mattered to have a paper trail. Officer Hale showed up again, notepad in hand, and eyes full of that careful neutrality you only see in small-town cops trying not to get dragged into local wars. He listened, wrote it all down. Didn't say much until I mentioned the sign. "Do you have a picture?" he asked. "No," I said. Didn't think I'd need to prove someone posted trash on my land. He shifted his weight. "You know the HOA says you agreed to an easement years ago?" My laugh was dry. "Show me the paper then. Show me my signature." He didn't. He just closed the notebook. "I'll file this," he said. "But you might want to talk to someone on the board. Try to de-escalate." I'll tell you what I want," I said, standing so he'd have to tilt his head up. "I want them to stay the hell off my land." He nodded like he was agreeing, but we both knew he wasn't. That night, someone cut the power to my barn. Just the barn. The house still had juice. But the security lights, the tools, the water pump, they were all dead. And on the wall of the barn, in white spray paint, someone had written one word: move. So now it was vandalism, intimidation, organized pressure. But here's the thing about pressure. It can break a man, or it can sharpen him, and I was getting sharper by the hour. I made my move the next morning. Packed a duffel, loaded the truck, and drove south. 2 hours, to an old friend's ranch just outside town. His name's Ray. We served together back in '88. He's got more scars than I do, and a memory for grudges that makes mine look short. I didn't tell him everything, just enough. Ray looked at me with that slow, calm way of his and said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I want them to show their hand." Ray smiled. We made a plan. Ray's place was a fortress disguised as a junkyard. From the road, it looked like a scrapyard graveyard. Old tractors, rusted metal, piles of sheet iron stacked like fallen dominoes. But underneath that camouflage, Ray had eyes on everything. Cameras behind hubcaps. Motion sensors under bird baths. The man lived like he expected war to break out before supper. We sat in his garage, the air thick with motor oil, and old country music playing low on a busted radio. He poured 2 mugs of coffee from a thermos big enough to put a man to sleep. You sure you want to bait 'em?" he asked without looking up. I don't want to fight," I said. "I want them to show their face, all the way." Ray nodded like he respected the distinction. "Then you need to give 'em a reason to crawl out of their hole." He showed me how to rig a decoy camera with a flashing light and no actual feed. Showy, easy to spot. We mocked up 2 and stuck them in my duffel. Then he handed me an envelope, thick, official looking. "This is your play," he said. Inside was a set of forged blueprints and an HOA-style proposal, titled Private Development Subdivision Approval Pending. It was fake, of course, but it looked real. And it said I was about to sell off my land to build luxury townhouses, complete with a private gate and no shared access. They want a trail through your place?" Ray said. "Tell 'em you're building a wall instead." It wasn't subtle. That was the point. I drove back with the decoy cameras in the passenger seat and the fake documents in my glove box. By the time I hit the gravel road to my ranch, the wind had shifted, literally. Dust blew in strange patterns, almost like the land itself knew something was changing. I started by posting one of the fake blueprint signs right near the damaged fence line. Bright colors, big letters. Private sale approved. No trespassing. Then I installed the flashing camera light just above it. Nothing says, I dare you, like pretending you're already halfway through a plan. Within 48 hours, things moved fast. First, I noticed tire tracks. Someone had driven close, too close, to the west fence. The next day, a county official showed up. Said he was doing a routine check on land permits. Didn't even look me in the eye when I asked who sent him. Just took notes and left. Then I got a call. A voice I hadn't heard in years. Henry Carver? Speaking. This is Walter Green. We met once. Briefly. I serve on the Homeowner Association board. I remember, I said, lying. There's been some confusion, he said. About a potential sale of your property. We'd like to discuss it, if possible. I smiled into the receiver. I'm busy, I said. But I'm sure the trail hikers will enjoy the luxury views once the bulldozers start. He didn't laugh. That night, I left the porch light off and sat in the dark with my thermos and a field notebook. Sure enough, around 2 a.m., a car slowed near the gate. Headlights flickered as someone stepped out, approached the sign, and took a photo. Flash, click, gone. They were rattled. Good, but they weren't stupid. Next morning, the sheriff came. Not Officer Hale this time. This was Sheriff Monroe. Bigger man, thicker mustache, and a belt buckle that could blind you at noon. Mind if I come in? He asked, already 3 steps past the gate. Depends, I said. You here for coffee or threats? He didn't blink. Had a complaint. Said you're falsifying development plans, stirring up the community. Who complained? It didn't say. I poured 2 cups. He took one without thanks. You causing trouble, Carver? I looked him in the eye. No more than usual. He sipped, set the cup down. Word is you're baiting the HOA. That true? Wouldn't be baiting if they stayed in their lane. He studied me. They're not used to resistance. I'd shoot. Then they should stay the hell off private land. We sat in silence. Cows moved in the distance. Somewhere, a hawk cried. I don't have a side here, Monroe finally said. But you play this wrong, and they'll bury you in red tape. Let 'em try, I said. I got more tape. He left without finishing the coffee. By the end of the week, the fake development story was spreading like fire through dry brush. A couple from the next town stopped by asking about buying a lot. I sent them off with a free bag of feed and a wink. That night, my front gate was chained shut from the outside. Heavy-duty padlock, not mine. Took me an hour with a hacksaw to cut through it. Inside the house, I found my files scattered. No sign of forced entry. No theft. Just chaos. Like someone wanted me to know they could get in and walk out untouched. They weren't just testing fences anymore. They were testing nerve. Mine held, but barely. By the 4th week, I started sleeping with my boots on. Not out of paranoia, out of habit. There's a difference. Paranoia makes you flinch at shadows. Habit just means you're done getting surprised by them. The signs were everywhere now. Trucks idling too long on the county road. People walking their dogs right up to my fence line, pretending not to film me with their phones. Someone even mailed me a brochure for a retirement village expansion. No sender address, just a mock-up with fake homes, and a name I'd never approved printed right over my land. Whispering Trails at Carver Creek. Funny how bold people get when they think the system's behind them. So I changed tactics. I shut down every visible camera, moved them all low and hidden. under eaves, behind birdhouses, inside a rusted lantern on the porch. I let them think I was blind. Then I started documenting everything. Ray helped me rig a landline recorder, too, just in case. My cell reception was already spotty, and I didn't trust digital backups anymore. Not with the way files had mysteriously vanished from my laptop last week. The next blow came mid-morning, a week later. I was working the fence again when a crew truck rolled up with cones and safety vests. 4 men got out, none local. Their logo was from a landscaping company 2 towns over. I stayed behind the fence. One of them, tall and wiry, called out, "We're here to begin the trail clearing." HOA directive. I didn't move. "You're on the wrong land," I said. "You step over that line. You're trespassing." He smirked. "We got clearance, old man. You don't want this to get messy." I walked back to the porch, slow and quiet. Came out again, with the double barrel in my arms. Not aimed, just resting against my chest. Legal, unloaded, visible. They packed up fast, but it made the evening news. That night, I was labeled as volatile by a local news segment. They ran footage, blurry, probably from a phone, of me holding the shotgun. They didn't mention the trespassers, just the man with the gun. Ray called, "They're tightening the noose." I know. "You ready for the next step?" Almost. I spent the next 3 days in the barn, working, not fixing fences, planning, drawing, measuring, and remembering. My wife used to say I was at my best when I had a problem to solve with my hands. "Give you a rusted bolt and 2 hours," she'd joke, "and you'll build a windmill." This wasn't a windmill, but it would turn. It was near dusk on the 4th day when I saw Nancy Bradley again. She stood by my mailbox like it belonged to her, tapping her foot and pretending to be patient. Her SUV was parked halfway in the ditch, hazard lights blinking like a nervous twitch. I didn't go out right away. I let her stand. When I did approach, it was slow, deliberate, every step heavy on the gravel. "Back for round 2?" I asked. She smiled, but it didn't touch her eyes. I thought we might talk. Civilly. You've never done anything civil in your life." She pulled a folder from her bag. "The HOA board has drafted a final notice. If you refuse the easement access by the end of the month, we'll pursue legal intervention." I opened the folder. Inside was jargon, threats, citations. Nothing with teeth. "You'll lose," she said quietly. I looked up at her. "Even if I do, I'll make sure you lose more." She stiffened. "You don't scare me." Good," I said. "Fear clouds judgment." She left in silence, tires spinning gravel like a spit in the face. That night, I sent Ray the final draft of the schematic. His reply came in one line, "Let's build." We started at dawn 2 days later. Ray brought the steel, I brought the land. We welded in the barn with the doors shut and the fans blowing hard. Sparks flew like summer lightning. The heat was awful, but the feeling, pure. It took 2 days. What we built wasn't pretty, wasn't meant to be. It was solid, permanent, and designed with one purpose: to force a confrontation. We buried the foundation deep, secured it with bolts longer than my arm. What stood in the middle of the back pasture by the 3rd day was a frame, a gate to nothing, a wall without a fence, just a bold, immovable structure made from steel and rust, and a sign: private land. Entry permitted by owner only. Violators will be photographed and published. Ray chuckled when we stood back to admire it. Think they'll bite? They'll chew their own tongue off trying. And they did. The gate stood like a dare. It wasn't connected to anything. No fence, no wall, just open space all around it. But it wasn't about function. It was about message. It said, I see you. I know what you're doing. And I'm not afraid to stand in your way. Ray left the morning after we finished welding it. He didn't say much, just clapped me on the shoulder and told me to call if things turned sideways. Then he drove off in that beat-up truck of his, red taillights vanishing into dust. I spent the rest of that day walking the property line, watching for signs. And by evening, I had one. Someone had thrown a dead raccoon into my well. I smelled it before I saw it. The water was ruined. At least for now. Intentional contamination. Message received. They were getting bolder. The next morning, I drove into town, filled 6 blue barrels with water from Ray's property, and dropped by the sheriff's office on the way back. Monroe wasn't there. Some deputy I didn't know stood behind the desk. Young, nervous, barely old enough to shave. I asked to leave a written report. The kid hesitated, then handed me a clipboard. I wrote down every detail, every time, date, photograph. Then I slipped in a copy of the HOA's final notice for the record, just so it was on file. Just so there'd be no confusion when things escalated. And they would. That night, I locked every door and window, loaded the trail cameras with fresh batteries, slept with the old revolver under my pillow. It was 2 days later when the trap finally sprung. They came just before dawn. 3 trucks, no markings, driving slow and quiet across the west field. I'd disabled the gate so they didn't use the road. Just rolled across the pasture like it belonged to them. I was already up, watching from the loft in the barn where I'd set up a silent perch days ago. The men got out. 5 of them. Dressed like workers but moving too clean, too organized. One had a folder in his hand. Another carried bolt cutters. They reached the steel gate and stopped. There was a new sign hanging from it that morning. Trespassers will be prosecuted to the full extent of Article 148C. Recorded. One of them stepped forward, pulled out a phone, and started recording. Another walked around the gate as if trying to understand it. A third began pacing the ground, looking for underground cables. They weren't confused. They were scouting. I clicked the remote. The gate lit up. Motion-activated floodlights, bright and blinding in the dawn fog. They flinched instinctively, hands to eyes. Then I stepped out. Didn't say a word. Just walked toward them with my phone in one hand and the folded deed in the other. They froze. One finally spoke. You Henry Carver? I am. We're with the HOA enforcement team, authorized by Municipal Code 62.4 to conduct preliminary assessments. Nice made-up number, I said. But there's no enforcement without legal process. You have no warrant, no approval, and no right to be here. He looked at his partner. We're not trying to start trouble. Just following up on easement activity. There is no easement, I said. You're trespassing. And you've been recorded doing so. This footage will be filed today with the county recorder and 2 lawyers who still believe in the Constitution. They didn't retreat fast, but they retreated. An hour later, Monroe showed up. He didn't knock. Just stood at the edge of the driveway, arms crossed. You escalated it. No, I said. They did. He exhaled like a man carrying too many names in his head. This isn't just your land anymore, Carver. You've made it something else. A message. A fight. I didn't start it. But you're damn sure going to finish it, huh? I said nothing. He nodded, almost respectfully, and turned back to his cruiser. That afternoon, I went into town. Every eye tracked me like I was a walking flame. At the hardware store, Ashley wouldn't even look up when I paid. The old-timers by the soda machine went silent as I passed. Let 'em. I was past wanting approval. I wasn't here to be liked. I was here to be left the hell alone. But the silence didn't last. 2 nights later, someone fired a shot. Not at me. At the steel gate. Just one. A clean crack in the night air, followed by the whine of rubber on dirt. Next morning, I found the bullet lodged in one of the uprights. Not a warning. A message. I sent the picture to Ray. His reply came in 3 words. They're cracking early. And they were, because they knew what I was building now wasn't just steel. It was resolve. I woke the next morning to the sound of gravel shifting. Slow, steady, like someone dragging a body. My hand went to the revolver before my eyes even opened. Years of instinct do that. I waited. Counted the seconds. Then I got up. Nobody. Just a wheelbarrow. And a man I hadn't seen in years. Elias Donnelly. My old neighbor. Used to raise goats, drink warm beer, and talk like he knew the secrets of the universe. He was the last person I expected to see pushing a rusted wheelbarrow full of cinder blocks across my yard. Morning, he said, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. You get lost? Nah, he said. Heard you were building a wall. I just stared. Thought I'd help. I didn't answer right away. Couldn't. My mouth was too full of questions I didn't trust myself to ask. He kept walking, right past me, and started unloading the blocks one by one near the edge of the pasture. I watched him for a minute, then went inside and came back with a jug of water and 2 tin cups. We didn't speak much that morning, just worked. By noon, the beginnings of something ugly and beautiful stood near the steel gate. Not a real wall, just a row of cinder blocks, stacked like teeth. Symbolic. Defiant. Later, I asked Elias why he came. He shrugged. Nancy's got my brother tied up in some permit mess back in town. Thought I'd balance the scales. That's the thing about resistance. It spreads in silence. But silence doesn't last in towns like ours. The wall made the rounds in record time. Photos showed up in online groups. HOA forums lit up with arguments. Some called it a dangerous escalation. Others said it was performance art. One post read, "Carver's going full Waco." They didn't know how close they were to the truth. Then came the notice. It wasn't certified, just folded into my mailbox like junk mail. White envelope, red stamp on the corner, the kind they use for eviction warnings. I opened it on the porch. It was from the HOA's Legal Advisory Committee. 4 pages of vague threats, legalese, and fabricated codes. But the last line was clear enough. I think was indeed. If this matter is not resolved within 7 days, further action will be taken to reclaim public access and assess financial penalties. They were bluffing. I knew it, but they were getting ready to stop bluffing. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of fear, because of noise. Mechanical, rhythmic, out near the ridge. I grabbed the flashlight, pulled on my coat, and made the slow walk across the pasture. What I found froze me. A trench. shallow but long, freshly dug, cutting through the far edge of my property line, just inside it. They'd started building the trail, not with papers, not with permission, with shovels, by hand, in the dark. Like thieves, I followed the line until it disappeared into the tree line near the creek. No equipment. Just raw dirt and the stink of insult. I stood there for a long time. Then I walked back, past the wall, past the gate, into the barn. And I opened the old chest I hadn't touched since before my wife passed. Inside was her satchel. Canvas. Worn. Smelled like cedar and dust. She used to keep her camera gear in it, back when she documented wildlife for the county. She had a lens that could see through fog. I lifted it out, cleaned it, charged the battery, packed it up. If they wanted quiet war, I'd give them clarity. The next morning, I tracked the trench, found fresh boot prints, snapped twigs, candy wrappers. Someone wasn't careful. I set up 4 cameras. Deep field, camouflaged, wide angle, triggered by movement. Ray called that evening. How bad? They're building. Permits? Nope. Then it's time. Not yet, I said. I need them deeper. I want them all the way in. Ray chuckled. You always did like the long game. I like justice to be airtight. He paused. You okay? I didn't answer right away. Then, ask me in a week, because I didn't know. That night, I stood by the steel gate, watching the moon rise over the half-built wall, and thought about the last conversation I had with my wife. About dignity. About lines that shouldn't be crossed. I never imagined I'd be defending that line with cameras and concrete. But here we were, and I wasn't stepping back. They didn't stop. The trench deepened, grew longer. By midweek, it curved through the pasture like a scar, lined with surveyor flags and fresh tire tracks. Whoever was doing the digging worked in shifts. Late at night, early morning, always just outside the window of legality. And I let them. The cameras did their job. Each night I'd sit at the desk in the barn, cycling through footage. One angle caught 3 men carrying lumber. Another caught a woman in an HOA vest marking trees with spray paint. But the best shot, the one that told me everything, was from the creek line. Nancy Bradley crouched over a clipboard, pointing into the trees like a general reviewing a battlefield. No hesitation, no uncertainty, just conquest. Ray called again. You ready yet? Not tonight, I said. Good, he said, because they just filed something at the county registrar. A petition. They're trying to make your land part of the HOA's green zone. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of the timing. Of course, they'd try to legalize it after breaking in. Retroactive righteousness. The night air was sharp when I stepped outside, canvas bag slung over my shoulder. Inside it, 3 laminated photos, each with a date and timestamp. One of Nancy, one of her crew inside the fence, one of the trail carved into my land, and a 4th item, the original deed to the property. Signed, notarized, indisputable. I drove to the HOA office at 3 a.m. No traffic. Just darkness and street lamps flickering like they didn't want to be part of this. Their mailbox stood at the edge of the empty parking lot. I slipped the envelope inside and added a yellow, sticky note on top. Let's see how far you're willing to take this. Then I went home and waited. The storm didn't come in thunder. It came in silence. No trucks arrived the next morning. No crews. The trench stayed empty, raw, and abandoned, but the air felt tight. The kind of pressure that builds before a fracture. At noon, Sheriff Monroe arrived. No uniform this time. Just jeans, a jacket, and the look of a man caught between two fires. You got them spooked, he said without greeting. It didn't take much. You've been quiet, and that scares them more than noise. He handed me a letter. They're demanding arbitration. Private. Off record. I declined. Figured you would. He paused. They're planning something. I know. You sure about this path? I was sure the day they stepped onto my field. He nodded, then added, I'm not saying this out loud, but if something were to happen to their equipment, you didn't hear it from me. I raised an eyebrow. I didn't say anything, he repeated, turning back to his truck. That night, the barn was quiet. Too quiet. Not even the owls made a sound. Then, just after 2 a.m., the security light on the south pasture snapped on. Movement. I slipped out the back door, cut across the field low and fast, sticking to the hedgerow. What I saw at the trench stopped me cold. 2 men. Heavy gear, gloves, masks. They weren't building. They were pouring something into the trench. Buckets. Viscous. Smelled sharp. Chemical. Poison. They were salting the earth. I took 3 photos. Stepped on a dry twig on purpose. They looked up. I didn't run. Just stood there, camera in hand. One bolted. The other froze like a deer. I said nothing. Just held up the camera and clicked. Flash. His face, full view. He cursed and ran. By sunrise, the pasture stank like acid. Plants already wilting at the edge of the trench. Ray arrived before noon. You good? No, I said. But I've got enough now. We spent the day assembling. Laptops, printouts, copies, 3 full folders. 1 for the sheriff, 1 for the county, 1 for the HOA board. The footage, the photos, the timeline, everything. Then we made our final edition, a copy of Nancy Bradley's HOA campaign leaflet. Preserving our community through cooperation and respect. We taped it to the front of the folder. Message received, but we weren't done yet. Ray looked at me and said, Now we build the trap. Shall all? And I said, No, we already did. It started with a headline. Local man accused of threatening HOA workers. Community divided. Someone had leaked the story. Not the footage, not the facts, just a half-truth soaked in implication. It spread fast. Social media lit up with comments, theories, accusations. Why won't he just cooperate? This is what happens when you live off-grid too long. That land could help so many. No one mentioned the poisoned trench. No one mentioned the theft. No one mentioned Nancy, but they would. Ray and I went into town that morning with our folders. Not to plead, not to argue, to deliver. First stop. Sheriff Monroe. He sat behind his desk like he'd been waiting for us. When I dropped the file in front of him, he didn't open it. Just said, Is it everything? More than enough. He nodded. I'll log it. Officially. Second stop. The county recorder's office. Clerk tried to wave us off until Ray leaned forward and said, This package contains evidence of criminal environmental damage, trespassing, and harassment. Would you like to be the first one subpoenaed for ignoring it? She blinked. Took the file. Last stop. HOA headquarters. Same parking lot. Same glass door. But we didn't go in. We pinned the folder to the community bulletin board. right next to the event flyer for Neighborhood Cleanup Day. Let them read it like gospel. Then we waited. It took 2 days. First came the silence. No more trench work. No more drive-bys. Just static. Like a paused game. Then came the cracks. Elias showed up again with a thermos and a box of roofing nails. Didn't say why. Just nodded at the wall and got to work. Then others followed. A woman from the next property. A kid who used to mow my lawn summers ago. They didn't say, "We support you." They said, "Need help?" But Nancy was quiet until she wasn't. The HOA called an emergency town meeting. They sent flyers, emails, texts. Concerned citizens gathering, discussing community preservation. I wasn't invited, didn't need to be. Ray and I parked 2 lots away. Watched as cars funneled in. Most folks dressed polite. Some carried signs. One read, "Trails not tyranny." Another, "Carver's Gate, hate." Inside, they packed the rec center full. Nancy stood at the podium like she was born there. Hair perfect. Blouse floral. Face glowing with righteous fury. And right beside her, mounted on a foam board, was a blown-up still of me standing in front of the steel gate, camera in hand. The caption, "Aggressive behavior, a threat to harmony." They let her speak for 12 minutes. Then came the shift. Someone in the back shouted, "What about the trench?" Nancy paused, blinked. Another voice, "You poisoned his land." "We saw the pictures." Murmurs, then louder. "My cousin works at the recorder's office. Says there's a file 2 inches thick with evidence." Nancy tried to smile, pivot, deflect, but the room didn't follow. They started talking over her, asking about budgets, about permits, about the emergency vote that never happened. Ray looked at me and said, "She's losing it." I didn't smile, because losing it isn't the same as being done. That night my gate was torn out. Not just pushed, not cut, torn. The bolts ripped from the ground. The whole steel frame dragged across the field like a broken rib. I found tire marks. Heavy duty. Too deep for a pickup. They used equipment. Construction grade. I stood there a long time, staring at the wreckage. The steel bent like soft wire. My hands shaking. Ray stood behind me. They're getting reckless. They're getting desperate. And that was the moment I stopped playing defense. Because now I knew the trap had worked. They didn't break the gate. They confirmed everything I needed. Every bolt. Every angle. Every drag mark. All of it caught on 3 separate cameras. They thought they erased the symbol, but they gave me the finale. And I was going to use it. I didn't sleep that night. Not out of fear, out of clarity. The kind of clarity that settles in your bones when you've run out of reasons to wait. By sunrise, I had everything packed. Footage backed up 3 ways. 2 physical drives and 1 offline server Ray had stashed in a bait shop freezer. 6 towns over. Paperwork triple-checked. Timeline precise. Ray loaded the truck without a word. We didn't need words. We'd passed that point. We drove into town just before the HOA board was set to meet. Not the public meeting, the real one. The closed door kind, where neighbors become enemies and enemies become voting blocks. Their building stood on the edge of town. Beige, forgettable. Like something grown in a petri dish of policies and fake smiles. We parked out front. No hiding, no sneaking. I carried in 1 item. The steel sign from the gate. Bent, scorched, with the bullet hole dead center. The receptionist opened her mouth to object, but Ray cut her off with a look. That's all it took. The boardroom was full. Nancy was already speaking. Something about de-escalation, about narratives getting out of control. I stepped in, walked to the center of the room, and dropped the sign on the table. It hit with a thud that silenced the whole damn building. Then I spoke. Saying, I've given you weeks to correct yourselves, to stop, to retreat. Instead, you lied. You trespassed. You poisoned my land. You destroyed private property. I turned to Nancy. And you, personally, directed crews to dig through my field without a single piece of legal authority. I have it all. Recorded, documented, time-stamped. She stood, lips tight, but didn't speak. I looked around. Here's what's going to happen. By tonight, you will submit a full written retraction to the county, disavowing all claims of easement, development, and environmental management. You will acknowledge the trench, the vandalism, and the false filings. Quietly, cleanly, and without spin. One of the board members laughed. Nervous. High-pitched. And if we don't? Ray stepped forward. Set a black binder on the table. Inside, every photo, every printout, the full dossier. He opened it, revealing the front page. A screenshot of Nancy, caught mid-step, spraying red paint on a tree inside my fence. I've prepared 3 copies, I said. 1 goes to the County Environmental Office, 1 to the Department of Land Management, and 1 to the news station that already asked for an interview. Nancy finally found her voice. You wouldn't dare. I stepped closer. You think this is about revenge? No. This is about exposure. You came for a trail. What you built was a case. Ray added, you should see the drone footage. You really should. No one moved. The silence felt like pressure in the lungs. I turned and walked out. Didn't wait for a response. Didn't need one. By the time we got home, the emails had already started. Not to me, to Monroe, to Ray, to the county office. 3 hours later, a new sign appeared, where the gate once stood. Notice of access withdrawal. Private land respected by community agreement. They used those exact words. Cowards, but effective. Nancy resigned the next morning. Personal health reasons. The trench was filled in within 48 hours. Quietly, no trucks, just a few men with shovels and closed mouths. The Green Zone petition disappeared from the registrar's site. And just like that, the silence returned. Real silence this time. Ray left me a 6-pack and a note. When they dig graves, give 'em the shovel. I stood by the field a long time that night. Wind through the tall grass. The faint smell of rust and redemption. Then I walked the property line again. Not because I had to, because I could. And every step felt like a signature on the dirt. This land, my land, still mine. Signed, not in ink, but in resistance.